Hello, everyone. I would first like to welcome all of you to The Office is Just Another App, Conditional Access Policies for Mobile, I cannot say mobile wallet credentials. It gets better. So, just as a heads up, when we get to the Q&A section, I am going to be walking around with a microphone to make sure that we pick up all of your great questions and all of the fantastic answers. So, without any other interruptions, I'd like to welcome Sean and Josh.
Well, hello, everybody. Thanks for joining us this afternoon. I am admittedly the last thing in between you and Sean's session next on privilege escalation, so shameless plug, make sure to check that out. But I'm Josh Jagfeld. I'm the VP of Partnerships at Swift Connect, a company who is dedicated to unifying physical access and digital identity and bringing those two things together. And we'll talk a lot about what that means in just a minute.
And I am Sean Rabbit. I am a senior consulting engineer for identity and access management here at Jamf. But more importantly, I am also a member of the Jamf Nation Global Foundation Board and would encourage all of you, if you have a free moment, to go up to the expo hall there, and there's a volunteer zone there that if you could just fill out a lovely little card of inspiration that's part of our global outreach efforts for folks. So please head on up there. All you. So today we're going to be talking about mobile devices and physical access management, but let's talk about why we needed to get into this here. So I don't know about you, I do not actually own a computer anymore personally. Dead serious. I have all those computers that Jamf has given me. My house looks like an Apple store, but my only computer that I own at this point is this iPhone. And frankly, I can get almost everything that I need to do for my work on a day-to-day basis done there, and it's my own personal phone. I expect that beautiful behavior of being able to work with the latest and greatest devices that I enjoy. And so do our end users out there. Whether it's an iPhone or an Android or their choice, they want to be able to use the toys that they want at home for work. So why should they have to be, the Jetsons at home and then be the Flintstones when they get into the office and have a physical access card there? So what Jamf is all about is making sure that we can simplify work for these folks. We are here to help organizations succeed with Apple. And by succeeding with Apple, they need to make sure that people that are your most important resources are capable of using the devices that they enjoy and make sure that they are using them to their full advantage at work as well. So to get to that point, we are telling people that trusted access is what we call our vision for a zero-trust world for organizations. But what that really means in this particular case is you as administrators are able to be given the tools to make the environment safe for people to use the devices that they love the most. And so we want to be able to say that in a trusted access scenario, you are able to enroll any device, bring your own or organizationally owned device, make sure that that device has been managed and secured, and make sure that we know who's using it so that way we can automate our controls on that device based on knowledge of that person, as well as make sure that they are able to only access resources on a managed device by a known person. Real simple. Trusted access. Ask for it by name. It's not a SKU. But let's actually look at a couple of the wedges here and describe what we're talking about. So when we talk about securing the device, we're going to start off with just some nice management on the device. And of course, the first thing you want to do is make sure something like passcode is enforced on the device. This makes sure the device is encrypted. So if somebody gets their hands on it, that should not be touching it, unless the kid's been looking over your shoulder and stealing your passcode for the last several times there, and then suddenly installing Minecraft or whatever the kids play these days. We make sure that that device is secured on there. The next step, though, is that we want to make sure that the most common attack vector for mobile devices these days is through the network. We don't have to worry. There we go. We want to make sure that when we're on the network, we want to get rid of all of those zero-click scenarios where somebody gets a text message or is being phished, for example. We want to prevent that person from performing behaviors that might hurt themselves. In this particular case, with our Prevent, we're going to be talking about Jamf Security Cloud, managing the DNS of the device there so they can be blocking websites that would be malicious for getting onto the site, and giving them normal, English-looking, human information to say, what happened? Why was I blocked from going to this site? No, that wasn't Amazon grandma calling you to say that you've been charged for a PlayStation 5. They're not supposed to click that link. You're actually getting phished. So we are able to provide that option and prevent things from happening on the device. Next, we can actually prevent malware from being installed on the device, one with management. So even for folks that are living in the EU that have the option to install third-party app stores, we could block that on institutionally owned devices, or we can just prevent them from being able to hit phishing websites or various malware sites out there. And it's not just the device, not just the stuff that you can put onto the device there, it also could be just the device state. So in this particular case, we're looking at a device that is out of date. OS, yes, I actually just watched this happen. Somebody didn't realize that 17.7 dropped, within minutes of JNUC. Thank you, Apple, for releasing brand new updates right before I have to go and update every demo device on our system. But that's okay. In this particular case, this continuous evaluation of what's happening on the device might raise the risk score. So maybe you don't want an out-of-date operating system or maybe an OS with a known threat vector installed to be able to access your organizational resources. So Jamf Security Cloud can be used to report on that status as well as block that information from being able to get out. This continuous access evaluation goes on even beyond the initial enrollment of the device and standard conditional access that you would do. We're constantly checking the state of the device and reporting it out to a whole bunch of different providers. And that way we can guarantee that only authorized users on enrolled devices that are secure and compliant can access that sensitive data. Now, Josh, what the heck does that have to do with unlocking a door?
That's a good question, Sean, and that's exactly what we're going to get into. And the title of this session probably gave a lot of it away. If you consider the proposition of trusted access, or just the idea of a conditional access policy, in the most basic sense, it is saying you need to meet a certain set of requirements in order to get access to something that the organization is going to offer to you. And there really is nothing about that statement that has to do with digital things or physical things. It is just the idea that only secure, compliant devices, known, trusted individuals, should be able to have access to things that are potentially sensitive in nature or privileged in nature or things that just not anybody in the public could have access to. And so when you think about what that means for this physical world, the idea of a badge today, how many of you are familiar with this situation? Have you ever done this to get into your office before? The answer is probably yes, right? So there are these little plastic cards that we use in many situations today that are the physical manifestation of our identity in the organization. It is a thing that has a unique identifier, just like our email address, our credentials for our digital systems, that is unique to us. And when we present it, it is us validating that we are who we say we are. Now, many of you in the room can probably see the problems with that. If I drop that card and I don't realize it, and Sean picks it up off the street and presents that card to a reader in my office, for all I know, Josh just badged into the office that day, and then Josh is going to go sit down at Josh's desk and do whatever Josh needs to do. Worst case scenario, Josh has got access to the IDF closet or whatever it might be, and who knows where it goes from there. But as an organization, that's a pretty unacceptable level of risk because there is no assurance that when that little plastic card touches the reader, I am actually who I say that I am. So we have a lot of opportunity to take what is the current state of these sort of anonymous little cards that we trust belong to the user that presents them and go through a absolutely massive sea change of upgrades in security and assurance. So what are all of the things that we need to account for? Well, first of all, these little cards are very, very vulnerable to this device. Has anybody ever seen the flipper before or know what this does? Yes, I hear some giggles in the room. Well, the flipper, unfortunately, is capable of walking near somebody who's got a prox card hanging off of their their belt or their pocket, which is the most common card credential format, and literally skimming that credential number, and then it can replicate it to another Prox card like that. No specific interactions required. I don't have to grab the card, put it in a slot. Close proximity works. That's a total nightmare. I think if that was the way that we could get access to IT systems or digital applications, we'd be in a world of hurt, right? Now, not everybody has a flipper, though, today, and so maybe it's not as big of a risk as we think it might be. Well, except for the fact that this is a map of San Francisco, and all of these Kimi locksmith stations have the exact same capability as the flipper. So if I find a card on the ground, I can walk up to the station, put $5 in, it'll spit out a copy of that card. I can go put that card right back down on the ground. That person might come back and get their card and have no idea that their identity was cloned, and then I can get into the office as often as I want to using that card, and nobody will be the wiser. So there's a huge opportunity here to tie the presentation or the use of that credential to the assurance that the person that's using it is the person that they're supposed to be, and it's only in control of the person who's supposed to have it. But in addition to that, there's all kinds of other problems. So these plastic cards, when you first started at your organization, how did you get it? Well, sometimes we have cards who have a picture printed on the badge. Does anybody have one of those today where the card that you use to authenticate also has your picture on it? Nightmare. Also has your company name written on it, so if you lose it, it's like, boy, I wonder which doors this opens. I can get it right there. So there's a ton of things that we can upgrade from a security lens by putting that credential into a mobile device. Now, the answer to Sean's question, what does this have to do about accessing physical spaces, is that device has to be a known good container. It has to be a good citizen for us to be able to trust putting that credential on there. Or all we've really done is taken physical molecules and put them into vulnerable bits and bytes on a device that could be easily skimmed. The good news is that with Apple Wallet and Google Wallet credentials, there are a tremendous amount of technologies that secure many of those things. So first of all, you can have an encrypted credential that can't be skimmed. That credential can be required to be authenticated through the user's credentials to get access to it in the first place. So I can't just request one. I have to prove that I am who I say that I am. I could even have to do a two-factor authentication. I could jump through many different hoops to make sure that when I request that credential on my device, I have a strong assurance that I am Josh, that I work for Swift Connect, so I should have the credential that Josh at Swift Connect is entitled to. Now, one of our customers here talked about a recent deployment. This is a landlord, actually, down in Austin, Texas. And one of the things that you may not consider when you're upgrading the security of a service is that actually end-user experience can dramatically improve as well. This is a story that we actually have heard year after year from a lot of great Jamf customers, IBM, SAP, who have found a way to tie not only the improvement of the technology platform that's available to people, but also their experience in engaging with that technology so that they feel like I'm using the devices that I want to use. They work in the way that I expect them to. I learn a lot of things about how my devices work based on my personal use. So my work capabilities should feel very similar to what I'm used to with my personal capabilities. Can I set up an email account? Can I download an app? Can I pay for my lunch? Those kinds of things are now common expectations. And what I think is so profound about this statement here is that many organizations today are approaching the increased opportunity around security of digital credentials to access buildings through the lens of employee experience. Because again, not only is it the improved encryption, the assurance that the user is who they say they are, but I can also do it on demand. I don't have to go wait in a badging office for 30 minutes to an hour in a line of people, wait for my badge to print, go to an office that has a badging office because I'm from the next city over, or fly there once when I first start. All this can happen in the moment on my phone as soon as I'm ready to get that credential, and I can walk into the office immediately after that. Now, who is Swift Connect? Swift Connect as an organization, I mentioned earlier, is the bridge between this physical world of places where we can identify ourselves and the digital identity that all of us have deployed in our organization today. Everybody here uses Entra or Okta or some sort of identity provider, right, which is the foundational level of trust to access the services in your organization. All the physical places that those types of services manifest are these areas up here. So access control systems are the things that decide whether doors should open or not. Many of us have used badges in that context today. I think, for those of you who raised your hand, that's probably the most common use case. But there are all kinds of other places in an organization where we have to identify ourselves to gain access to a service. One might be to use a smart locker when I come into the office. A lot of times in return to work scenarios, I may not have a dedicated desk. I might have a temporary desk that I use, and so when I come in, I have a random assignment of a resource for me. My desk, my locker to store my things in, maybe the bike locker, the EV charging station that I use. In all of these places, I generally have to identify myself to get access to that service and make sure that I'm the only one who can unlock it and then lock it again once I'm done. So those are examples of all of the places where they're not apps, they're not email, they're not storage services or other things that we're used to in the digital domain, but they are things that employees use every day where they have to identify themselves to get access to services from a company. And then there's a whole other host of other things, the readers on the walls, the credentials that are used. All of these things are proprietary systems that don't natively talk to each other. And our platform aims to bring all of that together so that they all talk, they all can interoperate regardless of credential technology, reader types, manufacturers who all have proprietary APIs and systems. We kind of just make it work. That's the idea. And then when you bring all of those systems together in conjunction with all of the IT infrastructure you've built today, it's a harmonious relationship where your digital identity drives your access to all of those connected services in the way that we expect today. When we onboard as a user, I just get access to Dropbox or Box. I just get my email access. It just works. So when you look at what that means across a deployment, this is an example of what we call this unified identity network, the physical and the digital identity coming together in a unified way to connect a multitude of things. On the left side of this slide is an example of the people who make credentials, those badges that today we carry around as physical plastic cards. It's all proprietary format. It's essentially a unique encryption key with a unique format of data that gets put on a card that somebody makes. All of those connect with Apple and Google through our platform. We connect to identity providers so that we know who can provision when and what they should have access to. And then on the right side is an example of actually a pretty common dilemma that a lot of people run into today. How many of you carry 2 badges when you go into an office because you have an enterprise space that you own and a landlord who owns the building where you have to get in an elevator or a turnstile or something? So we also bring together the multiple disparate credentials in the systems between those 2 completely separate organizationally owned access systems so that when I walk up to the reader, I just tap my phone or my watch, and it lets me in all the doors, regardless of if my landlord, Heinz Corporation or Silverstein Properties or BXP, whoever it might be, gets me in that entitled system. And then when I get up to my enterprise space, my own access control system lets me in as well. So it's sort of this idea of just a seamless service that people can use, and they don't have to worry about the friction points, the many friction points that there are to make it work together. Now, making all these systems talk together is pretty cool on its own because there is so much disparate technology. It is sort of like the internet or a lot of this IT infrastructure from 15 years ago. Nothing worked together. There were no APIs. But it's not enough. One of the things, again, that I mentioned earlier we have to make sure happens is if we put the credential on the device, it has to be a known good actor. It needs to meet IT and information security best practices and policies so that we're not potentially just creating a different vulnerability. And in this instance, like Sean talked about earlier, we use a very, very cool integration with the Jamf Security Cloud platform and the Jamf Trust app to be able to ascertain the risk level of the device. So Sean gave you some examples earlier. If a user clicks a phishing link, or they have an operating system that's 2 versions old and has a known vulnerability or a CVE, we can take that level of risk, and if it's low or medium or high, and actually set a threshold for that device to know whether it should or shouldn't be allowed to have a mobile credential on it. If I'm not a good digital citizen, I shouldn't be able to access my corporate resources accordingly, right? We wouldn't let somebody grab a badge from the office if they didn't bring their ID with them to the badging station, right? Because we gotta know who they are and know that they're trustworthy. So in this instance, here's a user that has a risky device. As you can see, this is an operating system vulnerability. Pretty easy to remediate, right? So I can do this myself. I can go to settings. I can go to software update my operating system. I can use my MDM to push out an operating system update. It doesn't really matter, but the idea is that I have now put a carrot on a stick to make my employee a good IT citizen to be a good physical security citizen as well. And then once their device is in a known good state, and the Jamf Trust app indicates to them that their device is in a known good state, then of course the idea is that we can allow them to provision a badge. And this is what that looks like. So in Jamf Security Cloud, the portal, we have a section for setting up a connection to a Swift Connect environment and setting your risk level threshold. Now, how many of you in this room have used Jamf Security Cloud before? Cool. OK, so in Jamf Security Cloud, you have the ability to kind of set custom thresholds for what you deem to be an acceptable level of risk. So for your organization, you could say, known CVE to operating system old version, not acceptable. That's a high-risk device. I will not allow that to get access to my facilities or other resources through Jamf Trust. But I may also say, if it's one operating system old, I'm going to mark it as low, but they can still provision a badge. And so you can set these custom thresholds. And then ultimately, when you set your settings for your mobile credential provisioning, you can choose your threshold level. So if the device is low or secure, I can issue a badge. Or if it's medium or high, I can't issue a badge, and the user has to remediate before that risk level lowers, and they can get a badge. Now, what does it look like? So we connect all these systems on the back end. We get Jamf Trust issuing a risk score, making sure that we have a trusted device. Well, what does the user experience look like? Remember I said earlier, when I started an organization, somebody's got to overnight me a badge with FedEx. It's probably 25 bucks to get the badge there, or I got to go wait at a badging office. That takes time. I'm waiting in line. Bad first day experience. Well, this could be the first day experience instead. So in this instance, the user opens the Jamf Trust application. The first thing that the app does is tells them that their device is actually in a known good state. So you'll see the green background here that says risk level secure. I go over to the side and I can see there are no open risks for this device. Then when I get back to the main screen, because my risk level on the device is at an acceptable threshold, I can tap provision a wallet credential. Now, like I said earlier, I have to authenticate. I have the single sign-on extension storing my credentials already. I've logged in once in this demo, and so it uses the single sign-on extension to identify me. And then I'm presented with the button to add to wallet. Now, this is the same on Android or iOS. The same add to wallet button appears. And then the next thing is, like anybody here who's added a credit card to your wallet before or any other service, it gets added into your wallet, and it's ready to go. So that took like 30 seconds. I didn't have to go wait in a line, didn't have to wait for a box. I could do it literally as I'm stepping out of my car to walk into the office for the first time. And I have a card that can't be copied. I know that the person who has it on their device is who they say they are, because now that's behind Face ID or Touch ID. So every time I open it up, I can make sure that person is who they are. And if I even want to, I can challenge at the reader. When they tap their device to the reader, I've got to use Face ID or Touch ID and then tap it again to make sure that it works. Dramatically improved user experience. Dramatically improved security experience, and it took 30 seconds to provision for the user. So that's how we can create this trusted access, sort of conditional access policy around provisioning a mobile wallet credential for a user today. That gives us the assurance that they are authorized, that they're on a trusted device, that the device is secure and compliant, and then, of course, we'll give them access to the things that they're entitled to. Now, what's that, you ask?
Well, Josh, I was just going to ask that. You know, I have a pass on my phone.
Yeah.
But there's a new version of the operating system that just came out because there was some horrible thing that would give me brain cancer. I don't know, whatever, on the old version of the operating system of my Android phone. What do I do about that?
Well, you know what? You've got a credential on your phone, Sean, so now there's nothing we can do about it because you already provisioned. Except wait, what if we made those conditional access policies continuous? If your risk score on your device changes over time, as we all know it does, because users use devices and they click stupid links and they don't install software, it happens. We are excited to announce that coming very soon, we will have the capability of using these continuous risk signals using the standard OpenID framework of shared signals and the continuous access evaluation protocol to modify the state of your credential based on the risk level of your device. So if I have a trusted device and I've provisioned my credential, and I tap a phishing link and my identity is compromised, I can make my credential suspend so that I can't get access to the server closet or the secure network or get into my office, which ultimately becomes a powerful carrot on the stick to make sure that that user reports that they've got a problem or they remediate the issue with their device. and at which point, when their risk score drops back down, their provision or their credential automatically reactivates itself, and they're able to use their device and their physical access exactly as you would expect for all of the services that we use today on the IT side. So this is a brand new thing that we have built to support Jamf's investment in the CAPE and SSF framework that they announced last year. A lot of other providers are participating in this, like Okta and many others, Netscope, Cisco. There are many. So pretty cool ability to make sure that those devices are always compliant, not just at the point of issuing the credential. And with that, we will open it up to question and answer and see if anybody has any questions for us.
One note, too, by the way, before we take questions, too, but I wanted to point out, too, that the Continuous Access Evaluation Protocol, open standard, the SSF sender that comes from Jamf Security Cloud can go literally to any endpoint out there and send its information about device or user status to an endpoint. So we're sending it to Swift Connect for physical access. We're sending it to Okta for accessing cloud resources. If you happen to have some sort of receiver that might want to be interested in that change in use state, we should have a conversation about that. Is your endpoint can ingest JSON? We can send that JSON over to you so you get the information as well. It's faster than SCIM, and it's more reliable. So,
I guess also worth mentioning, too, for a lot of people in this room, Apple has embraced part of the Continuous Access Evaluation Protocol with Apple Business Manager, so that at the time of enrollment, you can ensure a secure enrollment of the device as well. So pretty cool.
This is actually how managed Apple IDs suddenly stop working. So if somebody at Okta says that device is no longer compliant, the CAPE receiver from Apple gets a signal from Okta saying, that person just had a credential change, so I want you to make them log back into their iCloud account.
Yeah, so there's a whole network of pretty amazing solutions that are coming together to support CAPE.
So if anybody has any questions, do me a favor, lift your hand aloft, I will come to you.
Russell here's got a question on the front.
Thank you.
You had mentioned the scenario of buildings where you have your enterprise suite, but you're having to share access control with the landlord. I'm guessing there's still some level of cooperation that has to come from the landlord in order to integrate this. This isn't like they give us a list of credentials and we can magically make this work on our end without involving them, correct?
Yep, yeah, that is correct. So we have most of the major landlords in the United States and many in Europe who are already a part of our network and deploying Swift Connect across their cohort of buildings. But it does require collaboration. There's actually two ways that landlords like to do this. One is where they will allow your identity system to provide user information to their system, but they will then authorize and approve those users, versus the alternative, which some other people really like to do because it takes them completely out of the provisioning game, where they'll just say, hey, if it's in your system and you trust it, I'm going to trust it in my system, and we'll keep it up to date all the time. We have a ton of landlords who do that as well, and it just makes it completely seamless, and there's no discrepancy between the two systems. But yeah, works great. Any other questions?
So do you have excuse me, do you have people lining up outside the door in the rain when they're updating or doing software updates to try and get in?
No, because I think the goal here is to create a threshold that is pretty egregious, where hopefully it doesn't apply to most of your user population, right? In addition to, a lot of times the first place that you have to badge will be inside out of the rain more often than not. We don't get a lot of reports from people who get stuck outside of places. And an important thing to acknowledge too is that there's a lot of organizations who, when they roll out a mobile credential, don't do it 100% use case because they want some redundancy either for contractors or for failover or something, and so they'll go through a period where they still have a badge. They could use that to get in if they needed to, and then over time they phase out the physical plastic credential just to change user habits, make sure that they get all their use cases covered. And so yeah, it doesn't end up being much of a problem at all.
Personal story too, it's great for me being a remote employee because I can just boop with my watch. So this just goes into express mode for the credentials there. So I can just literally walk up into any Jamf office anywhere in the world and be just, oh, I need to go visit Amsterdam today, boop. I need to go visit Austin today, boop. It's just awesome.
In the same day, right? Amsterdam and Austin?
I have to be, I mean, you see how busy my schedule is for JNUC? They want me everywhere now. I need to get a TARDIS or something.
Probably important to acknowledge, too, that the card that's created in the wallet is it's called an emulation card. And so it's using the exact same technology as the physical cards. It is a magnetic NFC coil that's energized by the reader, so it functions in exactly the same way. And actually, importantly, on a lot of devices, not every device, even if the device is dead, that coil can still energize and transmit the credentials. So if you've run out of battery for the day, you can still present your phone to the reader and it will still beep and let you in the office. So, not a lot of times you get really truly stuck.
All right, so for a managed Apple ID, we know the wallet is a student ID or an employee badge, right? Is that employee badge include the technology to access the NFC?
It does,
Okay.
yeah. So managed.
On a BYOD enrollment, we could issue these.
What was that?
For a user-enrolled device
Yeah.
that uses managed Apple ID, we can still use these.
Yeah, with the Apple Business Manager update in, I think it was April or March of this year, managed Apple IDs became eligible to use an employee badge.
In fact, it's how we do it internally at Jamf. So this is my own personal this is my own personal phone. I haven't done the upgrade, so it's still a 15. Don't worry, you'll go to a good home. But it's a managed Apple ID. I just log in with my jamf.com email address. Now this device is managed. If you have not set that up yet for doing the managed Apple ID and account-driven user enrollment, it is quite magical to have the ability to use my favorite device, anything I need to do for work. So, and when you send out deployments like apps like Jamf Trust, it does actually receive everything, including the app config necessary, because to the MDM, it is a managed device.
You mentioned there is an OS requirement for the iPhone, for the Android device, I guess. Is it the same thing for the smartwatch?
Yes, the OS requirements we talked about were like information security policy requirements. So recent, modern, within the last couple of versions, unless you want a higher level of risk. To run Apple or Google Wallet actually goes back many versions of each operating system. So I think right now Apple will tell you that an iPhone 6S can use a employee badge, and if anybody here knows how ancient that is in the tech world, that is very ancient. And on Google, it's like 5 operating systems old. Android Wear is very, very early on in capability for wallet credentials. I think Fitbit and Garmin will be coming on board very shortly, but they haven't launched officially yet. So there is progress there. Samsung Wallet is another example of very early in the stages with all the credential providers and getting that infrastructure built out, but it's kind of the same story. Every device and version number has to kind of be proven and built out. But on stock Android, on the wide range of devices that are out there, you can have 5 or so operating systems old and still run Google Wallet.
And a side note too, you probably want to check Jamf Security Cloud for the minimum operating system necessary for Jamf Trust to run it there. Yep. We generally test N-2 for iOS devices, and I'm not sure on Android. I'll have to look that up for you. Yep. Forgive me, I don't have an Android device. Yeah, haven't touched a Windows machine in almost 15 years too, I realize.
Any other questions for us? Okay, excellent. Well, we appreciate you joining us today. If you do have other questions after we've finished, come on up, ask them offline, but we'll be around for a little bit. And thanks again. Don't forget to check out Sean's session about privilege escalation next. It's not here, though. So.
Nope, I'll be in Davidson B next, and if you do need to find me, my next available time is the brain date at 5 o'clock, which will be a group brain date where I may be just bringing the entire session with me, Pied Piper style. It'll be fun.
Thanks, everybody.